The first light of dawn spilled across the vast grasslands of Kruger Nature Reserve. A thin veil of morning mist clung to the earth, shivering beneath the early chill. Birds chirped quietly. The world seemed still, peaceful, undisturbed. And then came the sound, a low, guttural whimper, barely louder than a breath. It wasn't the cry of a bird or the grunt of a wild hog. It was something raw, something desperate, something that didn't belong. The staff on the morning shift followed the sound to the far corner of the medical ward. There, behind the metal bars of a sterile kennel, lay a dog, black, thin, and hauntingly still. A single patch of white fur marked her chest, but everything else about her was drenched in grief. Her name was Camila. She hadn't moved all night. She didn't react to footsteps, didn't blink at voices, just stared into nothingness. 3 days ago, Camila had given birth to 5 premature puppies. None of them survived. And though her body had begun producing milk, her mind had already started slipping away. Most people don't think of dogs as having postpartum depression, but science says otherwise. In animals capable of forming strong emotional bonds, loss can hit like a thunderclap. Dogs, elephants, even some species of whales, they grieve, they wither, they mourn. And Camila? She was drowning in it. But something deeper stirred beneath her stillness. Something ancient, something defiant. Her body hadn't stopped producing milk. Her mammary glands remained full. Prolactin surged through her system. Oxytocin, known as the love hormone, still coursed through her veins, screaming for something, anything to nurture. She didn't know it yet, but miles away, in the thick of the bush, another life was struggling to survive. A baby leopard, alone, shivering, orphaned. His mother, a majestic predator, had been gunned down by poachers. The cub, too young to fend for himself, had been left to die beside her lifeless body. The patrol team found him nestled in tall grass, barely breathing. His fur was matted, his hind leg wounded, his eyes crusted shut with infection. They named him Atlas. When the tiny cub arrived at the medical center, the air shifted. 2 souls, one grieving, one gasping, breathed the same air for the first time. Howard Mitchell, the center's director, stood in the observation room that morning, looking from Camila to Atlas and back again. A grieving mother, a dying son, different species, different worlds, but one unspoken truth. Both had lost everything. And that morning, a dangerous, beautiful question took root in Howard's mind. Could 2 broken creatures heal each other, even if they weren't the same species? Atlas was dying. The tiny leopard cub lay curled inside a heat-controlled incubator, his body barely rising with each breath. His fur, once spotted gold, now clung damp to his frail frame. His temperature had dropped to 36.1 degrees Celsius, almost 2 degrees below what his young body needed to survive. Hypothermia, dehydration, infection, starvation. The medical team worked with quiet urgency, injecting fluids into his thin veins, cleaning the wound on his hind leg, administering broad-spectrum antibiotics. The room smelled of iodine, wet fur, and something else, desperation. Atlas whimpered in pain as a warm formula was gently pushed into his mouth through a syringe. The staff had crafted the milk specifically for large cats, packed with proteins and taurine, the amino acid vital to feline development. But no formula, no matter how precise, could replace the antibodies, warmth, or comfort of a real mother. That was the cruel truth. Because baby leopards, like all big cats, aren't just born to feed, they're born to bond. Without the soft rumble of their mother's purr, without the scent of her breath, without her heartbeat to press against their will to live, begins to collapse. And for Atlas, that collapse was beginning. Meanwhile, on the other side of the facility, Camila hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. She refused chicken, refused beef, refused to stand. She lay with her back to the kennel door, her breathing shallow, her eyes fixed on a spot only she could see. Some said dogs forget quickly, but grief had its grip on her. Howard Mitchell watched both animals from behind reinforced glass. He didn't speak. He didn't scribble notes. He just stood there, brows furrowed, eyes distant. He had been here before. In his 20 years working in wildlife conservation, he had seen cubs lost to poachers, lionesses die in childbirth, elephants mourn their dead calves for days. But never had he seen two species so clearly mirror each other's pain. On one monitor, a leopard cub trembled in a sterile incubator, his eyes flickering between sleep and unconsciousness. On another, a dog lay motionless in her grief, her body still full of milk no one would ever drink. He turned to his assistant, Hannah, a sharp young researcher with a background in animal psychology. "He's not going to make it," she said, shaking her head. "It's not just the infection. He's shutting down. He needs a mother." Howard looked at the screen showing Camila. "And she needs a child." Hannah blinked. Are you suggesting?" He nodded slowly. "I'm suggesting we give them each other." There was a long silence in the room. Then, "Howard, that's a wild leopard. Camila's a dog. This isn't some animated Disney movie. What if he attacks her?" "Then we intervene," Howard said calmly. "But right now, he's dying, and she's fading. Maybe, just maybe, what they both need can't come from us. Maybe it has to come from something deeper, something ancient, something they still remember." That night, after the facility fell quiet and the stars settled like dust across the African sky, a small room was prepared. Temperature, 27 degrees. Humidity, 60%. No bright lights, no sudden noises. Just soft mats on the floor, a dim red lamp overhead, and two broken souls about to meet for the very first time. Atlas was carried in first, wrapped in a towel that still held the scent of milk. He was laid down gently on a heated cushion. Then came Camila. She hesitated at the doorway, tail low, eyes wary. The handlers didn't force her in. She stepped inside on her own. They placed the two animals 6 feet apart. And then they waited. The room fell silent, so silent you could hear the hum of the thermostat. And then it happened. A tiny cry, barely a whisper. Atlas let out a sound somewhere between a mewl and a whimper. It cut through the silence like a blade. Camila's ears twitched. Then again, the cry, fainter this time. Camila lifted her head. She looked across the room, at the small creature trembling on the cushion. And for the first time since her puppies died, she moved. Camila stood perfectly still. Her paws, once heavy with grief, now hovered in place, uncertain. Her eyes fixed on the leopard cub across the room. She didn't bark. She didn't growl. She just watched. Atlas whimpered again. The sound, small, fragile, and heartbreakingly familiar, triggered something in her. A flicker, a spark, something ancient, something instinctual. She took one step forward, then another. Hannah held her breath behind the glass. Howard's hand hovered near the emergency button. The entire room, researchers, volunteers, even the medical staff, watched through the infrared monitor like witnesses to a miracle not yet written. Camila reached the cushion, her nose lowered toward the shivering ball of spots and fur. She sniffed gently, one long inhale, then another. Her tail didn't wag, but it didn't tuck either. Atlas lay motionless, his breath coming in shallow waves. And then Camila did something no one expected. She licked him, once, softly, right across the forehead. It wasn't a cautious lick. It wasn't curious. It was maternal. The kind of lick a mother gives her newborn to say, "You're here, you're mine, you're safe now." Atlas stirred, not startled, not scared. He let out a faint sound, something between a sigh and a murmur. His small head pressed lightly against her leg. Camila responded by curling her body protectively around him. She didn't lie on the cushion. She formed it with her warmth, with her sorrow, with her milk-heavy body now wrapped around a creature she'd never met before tonight. The room behind the glass erupted into stunned whispers. Hannah covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. She's accepted him." Howard's voice was quiet, reverent. She needed him. That's not the same thing." They waited. 10 minutes passed. Then Howard decided to try something unthinkable. He stepped into the room with a small bottle of formula, but this time he didn't feed Atlas. He placed the cub gently against Camila's belly, near her teat. At first, Atlas squirmed, unsure. His eyes blinked slowly. Then his nose caught something warmth, milk, scent. He inched forward, hesitated, found the nipple, latched. He began to suckle, weakly at first, then stronger. Camila didn't flinch, didn't move. Her eyes remained wide open, staring into the middle distance. Her body curved like a comma around the cub, who was now nursing, like he belonged there all along. That night, for the first time since her puppies died, Camila fell asleep with something pressed against her belly. And for the first time since his mother was gunned down, Atlas slept without fear. They became inseparable after that night. Camila followed Atlas wherever he went. When he cried, she came running. When he stumbled, she steadied him with a nudge. When he curled up to sleep, her paw would drape over his back as if to say, "You are not alone anymore." And Atlas, still small but growing stronger each day, responded with unwavering trust. He would nuzzle into her chest, rest his head against her heartbeat, and let out the softest sound a leopard cub can make, something so close to a purr, yet uniquely his. Researchers noted a strange phenomenon. Atlas began to mimic Camila's behaviors. He would raise his nose to the wind like a dog. He would bark, not a true bark, but a throaty, short yelp when startled. He even began to follow Camila's lead when sniffing around corners, tail low, ears alert. Of course, instincts still ran deep. He climbed where she couldn't, stalked shadows she ignored. But where wildness had left a void, Camila had poured love. And it changed him. One morning, Howard entered the enclosure to find them curled together on a rock. Atlas's head rested against Camila's flank. Her body encircled him like a living blanket. Around them, the sun broke through the trees in long golden shafts. Howard didn't speak. He just stood there, watching. He had seen animals fight for survival. He had seen them hunt, flee, kill, protect. But never had he seen love quite like this. And in that moment, he realized something profound. This wasn't science. This was soul. Days passed, then weeks, and with each sunrise over the Kruger Reserve, Atlas took one more step toward life. His body grew stronger, his breath steadier. The wound on his hind leg began to close, healing faster than any of the medical team had predicted. He gained weight. His coat gleamed under the African sun, golden with black rosettes that deepened each day, like paint drying into permanence. But more remarkable than the physical healing was the emotional one. Camila had become a mother again, not just in biology, but in every behavior. She licked Atlas clean after meals. She barked sharply when he wandered too far. She even positioned herself between him and strangers, teeth bared if she sensed danger. It wasn't play. It wasn't confusion. It was instinct reforged through heartbreak and reborn through love. And Atlas? He followed her like a shadow. When she drank, he drank. When she dozed beneath a tree, he curled beside her. When she trotted ahead, tail high, he padded close behind, his movements clumsy at first, then more graceful with time. The staff at Kruger began to document their days. Atlas learned to stalk not the way wild leopards do, but in short bursts, hiding behind rocks the way Camila taught him. She showed him how to sniff the wind, how to listen for distant footfalls, how to freeze when uncertain. They were lessons not born of shared species, but of shared experience. And somehow, they worked. One morning, Howard watched as Atlas chased a butterfly through the clearing, pounced, missed, and then turned back toward Camila, eyes wide with joy. She didn't move, just tilted her head and gave a low, motherly huff as if to say, "Try again, little one. You'll get there." It wasn't just the researchers who noticed. The world did too. Photos of the unlikely pair began circulating online. Camila, the black dog with tired eyes and a white patch on her chest, nuzzling a spotted leopard cub twice her size. Atlas, the predator in training, curled up with his head pressed into her flank like a nursing puppy. People couldn't look away. News crews started arriving. Wildlife photographers camped near the enclosure. Journalists asked, "Is this real?" And Howard always answered the same. "As real as anything nature has ever shown us. Love doesn't check for species." But even miracles need boundaries. At 7 months, Atlas had grown to nearly the size of an adult jaguar. His frame elongated, his muscles thickened. His eyes, once full of dependence, now gleamed with the slow burning fire of independence. He began testing his strength, climbing higher, moving faster, stalking Camila not with harm in mind, but with the instinctual play of a predator coming into his own. And Camila? She didn't fight it. She watched. She let him pounce, let him wrestle, let him pin her down before slipping away with a playful growl. She knew. Mothers always know. One night, under the vast African sky, the staff noticed something curious. Atlas had made a small kill, a rabbit, swift, elusive, but not enough to outrun a growing leopard. The staff expected him to eat it right there. Instead, Atlas carried it back, clenched gently in his jaws, and dropped it at Camila's paws. She sniffed it, nudged it once, then turned away, leaving it for him. It was an unspoken exchange. "I see you growing. I still remember who you are." As days grew longer and Atlas's energy surged, Camila began stepping back just slightly, just enough. She no longer rushed to his side at every whimper. She no longer followed him up every hill. But she always watched, from the shade of a tree, from behind a boulder, from just far enough to let him feel the wind on his own face, but close enough to catch him if he ever fell. The researchers began calling them the bridge pair, a term that quickly caught on in conservation circles. Because that's what they had become, a bridge between species, between wild and domestic, between grief and healing, between what nature says is possible and what love dares to prove otherwise. The first sign came over something small, a piece of meat. One afternoon, a handler entered the enclosure with lunch raw beef, freshly cut, rich with scent. Normally, the portions were split, one for Atlas, one for Camila. But this time, due to a simple oversight, only one large piece was placed down. At first, it was like every other day. Atlas approached slowly, muscles coiled with anticipation. Camila trotted behind, head low, tail wagging faintly. But when the scent hit his nose, something shifted. A low, guttural sound rumbled in Atlas's throat. Not a whimper, not a playful growl. A warning. Camila paused. Her eyes narrowed, not with fear, but confusion. She took another step forward. That's when it happened. Atlas lunget. Not to attack, but to claim. He bared his teeth, swatted the air with a paw, and placed himself between the meat and Camila like a lion defending his territory. It was the first time she'd ever seen him like that. The growl, the snarl, the flash of wildness that no dog could mimic, no human could suppress. Camila didn't retaliate. She stepped back, slowly, eyes wide, not with anger, but hurt. She watched him tear into the meat with hunger that bordered on violence. The same cub she'd nursed. The same cub who once nuzzled against her chest for warmth. Now, a young leopard with the instincts of a hunter and no room left for gentleness. Howard watched through binoculars from the observation tower. Hannah stood beside him, arms folded tight. "He's shifting," she said quietly. "He's supposed to," Howard replied. They both knew this moment would come. The turning point, the test, when love must compete with biology, After that day, the changes came quickly. Atlas began patrolling the enclosure like a predator. He no longer slept curled against Camila. He slept alone on high rocks, in dense brush, watching the world with new eyes. When Camila called to him short, throaty barks, he sometimes ignored her. Sometimes he answered with silence. Sometimes with a snarl. It broke something inside her. But she never stopped watching, never stopped following at a distance, never stopped being his mother even when he no longer acted like her son. The team debated what to do. He needs to be with his own kind, one researcher said. He's still emotionally bonded to her, another argued. If we separate them now, we risk trauma to both. If we wait too long, we risk injury. The room fell quiet until Howard spoke. We let him decide. And nature did. 2 weeks later, the facility brought in another leopard female, same age, rescued from a poaching camp up north. She was strong, independent, untrusting. They placed her in an adjacent enclosure, separated by a wire fence. At first, Atlas ignored her. Then, he didn't. He began spending hours by the fence, watching, sniffing, pacing, sometimes growling low, sometimes simply sitting mesmerized. Camila noticed. She didn't react, didn't try to pull him away. Instead, she began lying farther from Atlas's favorite spots, giving him space, watching from afar as he paced and purred and slowly became a leopard. Then came the final test. One morning, they left fresh meat in the middle of the enclosure again. One portion. Deliberate this time. A controlled scenario. Atlas approached first. Camila, from across the field, walked slowly toward him. Would he snarl again? Would he push her away? Atlas looked at her, just looked. And this time, he didn't growl. Instead, he stepped aside. Camila sniffed the meat, picked up a small chunk, carried it gently to him, dropped it, and stepped back. She offered it first. Atlas sniffed it. Then, astonishingly, he nudged it back toward her. You first. They ate together, in silence. Not like mother and infant, not like dog and cub, but like equals, like two creatures who had come to understand something most humans never do. Love changes. It evolves. Sometimes it even lets go, but it never disappears. That night, Atlas didn't curl beside her. He curled beneath the tree where he always watched the stars now. And Camila? She didn't follow. She just looked up, and for the first time, she let him go. 6 months later, the Kruger Reserve had changed. Not in structure, not in policy, but in spirit. Visitors arrived in quiet reverence, not to see a spectacle but to witness a connection, a bond once impossible, now undeniable. A story that no photograph could truly capture, no documentary could fully explain. Atlas was now nearly full-grown, muscular, silent in his steps, a predator through and through. Camila was smaller now in comparison, slower, older. Her coat had begun to gray at the muzzle, but her eyes had never been more alive. They lived in a semi-wild enclosure now, expansive, complex, natural, built not just for Atlas to grow, but for Camila to stay. It was the reserve's answer to a question no science journal had dared to ask. What do you do with a bond that breaks the rules of nature, but heals what nature broke? Atlas climbed trees, hunted birds, stalked prey in tall grass. The staff began introducing him to other leopards in nearby enclosures, slowly, carefully, and he responded curious, alert, cautiously open. But no matter where he went, no matter how long he wandered, at night, he always came back. To her, to Camila, he would lay his massive body beside hers, no longer the size of a nursing cub, but still curling against her as if she was the only home he had ever known. One evening, the gate between Atlas and a young female leopard was open. The moment was tense. They sniffed, circled, tested each other's patience. Camila watched from the hill, not anxious, not jealous, just watching. After an hour, Atlas lay down near the female. She didn't run. She lay beside him. And for the first time, Camila turned away. Not in sadness, not in resignation, but in peace. She had done what she was never meant to do. She had raised a child not her own, not her species, not her world. And she had done it well. Howard watched from a high rock as dusk painted the sky in burnt orange and blue. He saw Atlas lounging on a tree branch, the young female nestled below him, and Camila beneath them in the shade, resting quietly, her head on her paws. Her eyes drifted closed not in exhaustion, but in calm. "It's strange," Hannah said beside him. "We study animals our whole lives, thinking we understand their instincts, their limits, their behaviors." Howard nodded slowly. "And then a dog raises a leopard," he said, "and reminds us maybe we don't know a damn thing." They laughed softly, not because it was funny, because it was true. That night, Atlas climbed down from the tree and walked toward Camila. He curled beside her like he had hundreds of nights before, and she, half asleep, lifted her head and gently licked his cheek. A ritual, a memory, a farewell. Maybe, maybe not. There's no script for love like theirs. No ending that feels complete. Only a truth that lingers long after the camera fades. That love, in its purest form, asks for nothing. It just gives, without question, without border, without needing to make sense. Camila and Atlas never knew they weren't supposed to love each other. And maybe that's what made it so powerful. Not logic, not biology, but the simplest instinct of all, to care for something when it's at its weakest, to hold on until it can stand alone.